So Jesus then walks past the water pot, takes a towel, wraps it around, and goes to them who they've already decided where they're going to be, because it says they reclined at table. And Jesus washes their feet. Until he comes to Peter, and Peter says, "You're not going to touch my feet." And Jesus says, "Well, if I don't, you have no part of me." And then he says, "Not just my feet, but everything." And then after he had done that, put the basin of water away, put the towel away, is where you pick up our passage. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is he who sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." Verse 15. "For I gave you an example, that you should also do as I did to you." What Jesus gave to his disciples on that night was his example. It really was true that when you walked into a person's house, they would have something there to wash your feet. And for the most part, you would wash your own feet. But if you had a servant, the servant would do it. And their feet were dusty and dirty and muddy. But Jesus walked past, and to their feet, he acted as a servant. So Jesus says, "I am, you call me your teacher and Lord." That word for teacher is rabbi. Rabbi was more than, we don't call them teachers anymore, rabbi was more than an educator. Rabbi was someone who had people who were following him. They were his disciples. We get the term disciples where we get our word learning from and teaching from. They were his learners. These men had left families. These men had left everything and followed him. They had left their businesses. They had left everything. And they were following him to learn. That's what a disciple was someone who followed to learn. And when you did that, your teacher was always way up here. They were always superior to you. You did whatever they told you to do. You followed wherever they went. Now, a lot of these teachers had a specific place where they stayed, so it wasn't like their itinerant teachers like Jesus was. These guys followed him all the way around. And Jesus says, "You call me your rabbi, and you're right. You're my disciples." He said, "You've also called me Lord." Now, you may have had a teacher at school that was especially important to you, someone who taught you very well. You may have had a teacher that had an impact in your life as it is now. But you've never had a Lord. That word for Lord is kurios. It is someone who bought you. It is someone who has power over you. These disciples had gone way past just saying, "This is Rabbi." When Jesus had the disciples and he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" They said, "Well, some say you're Elijah, some say you're Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets." And then Jesus looks at them and says, "But who," and it's plural there, "who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "We believe you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Every other disciple there agreed. Because those were some big words. They all said, it was basically, "You're right, that's what we believe that you are." Remember, just before they came in for Lazarus, Thomas says, "Let's go," because they said, "Lord, they're trying to kill you." Thomas says, let's go, we may die with him. That's where they were with Jesus. Not just rabbi, but kurios, not just teacher, but Lord. Someone who they would follow to their death. And Jesus said, if I am that, he said, by the way, which I am, and I washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet too. Because I've given you this as an example. Earlier, Jesus had said, I didn't come here to be served, but I came here to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. What he told his disciples was simply, I've given you an example, be a servant. Now, there are some groups that will take this very literally. They said they wash other people's feet. When Ruth and I were in California, the church that I pastored for a couple of years had a Seventh-day Adventist church that met on Saturdays. It was really convenient because when we were there, they weren't. When they were there, we weren't. And they had brought their foot washing basins. And once every 2 months or so, almost like when we do Lord's Supper, then they have a special time when they would wash each other's feet. And I think that's a wonderful symbol. I think it's an important symbol. But I think it's kind of missing the point. Jesus told them not to do an act. Jesus told them that's who you're supposed to be. You're to be a servant. You're to be a servant to those who are coming in here saying, I'm better than you. You're to be a servant to those who said, I've been a better disciple than you have been. You're to be a servant to people who you consider on your own level. That's who you're to be a servant to, and to those underneath that. And to emphasize this, to make this where the disciples understood that this was really important. Jesus did one of his amen statements, the truly, truly, or the King James Version, verily, verily, I say to you, that a slave is not above his master. This is what I've told you to do. Blessed are you if you do it. The one who serves, the one who is the servant, is the one who is following the steps of Jesus. Because if I am not, and it isn't simply a matter of am I serving someone, am I living as a servant? Because if I am not living as a servant, if I'm not doing servant-type stuff, then I don't look like a servant. I look like a hypocrite. And that was one of the distinguishing characteristics of Jesus and the Pharisees. We find Jesus telling his disciples once, what the Pharisees and religious leaders tell you to do that. But don't act like it. The Pharisees knew the law inside and out. The priests knew how to do sacrifice and take care of the temple. So Jesus said, what they tell you to do, what they tell you, do that. But don't act like them. Because they were anything but servants. They were aloof. Because they knew the law and because they had this power, they stood above the others. Do you remember when Jesus healed a man who had been born blind? And Jesus had walked away and sent him off to the pool to wash it off, wash the mud off of his face, and he was gone. And the religious leaders, he did it on a Sabbath, and the religious leaders were upset with it, and they asked him several times, who did this to you? How did this happen? And he says, I've already told you. Do you want to be one of his followers too? And they looked at this guy who had just been healed, and no one had ever heard of anyone being born blind, being healed. And they looked at him and said, who do you think you are? You were born in sin. And it isn't just they sent him away. What it technically says, they kicked him out of the tabernacle. He couldn't go there anymore to worship. They kicked him out because he had said something of disdain to them because they were above that. Jesus was in a tabernacle, was in a synagogue. A man who had a withered hand was there, and the Pharisees were wondering, I wonder if he'll heal on the Sabbath or not. So Jesus looked at him and said, which one of you, if you have an ox that falls into a ditch, will not pull that ox out of the ditch? Sin has a withered hand. And he healed him. And it bugged him so bad, it began to plot on how to kill him. Primary difference between the Pharisees and Jesus was not necessarily theological. It was one was a servant and one was superior. And so Jesus looked at his disciples and said, you've got to get this. You've got to get this. A slave is not greater than his master. And if I have given this example to you, then you are blessed if you follow it. Or the flip of that would be, and you're judged if you don't. And it's not just for those 12 guys there, because at this point, Judas was still there. It's for us too, isn't it? Aren't we to be that kind of servant? Aren't we to be that one that looks for places to serve? I don't think Jesus came walking up to the upper room as he walked up the steps and said, I think I'd like to wash these guys' feet. He gets up there and God spoke to him. He saw the arrogance and the pride. So he gave him an example. On the night that he was going to be arrested, and he gave them an example to serve. To be that servant. And we're to be that too. Navigators have a saying. You can tell what kind of servant you are whenever you get treated like one. Now, isn't it easy to serve when everyone said, man, that was nice of you. We so appreciate what you just did. What a great servant you are. What a wonderful person. May God bless you for what you've done. And it's easy to go, I was a pretty good one, wasn't I? Pride and servanthood, by the way, don't go together very well. But it's so easy to look at it and go, yeah, you're right. We need to do more of this. This was really good. It's a lot harder whenever you serve someone, they treat you like a servant. Or they complain. Or they show a lack of gratitude. Or they act like you should have done it in the first place. And then that part of us seems to go, wished I hadn't even done it. If that's the way you're going to treat me, have at it yourself. That's not being a servant. That's using servanthood. Using servanthood as a ritual, but not being a servant. A servant follows Jesus. A servant serves wherever Jesus calls us to serve. A servant is one that is seeking, where would you have me to serve? And there will be people who will look at you and think that you're weak because you do it. There'll be people at you and they'll try and misuse that. The question is, are you serving or are you a servant? Are you just doing it to do it because you have to, or are you doing it because it's who you are? Because I am convinced of this. If I'm not living as a servant and looking like a servant, then I'm living and looking like a hypocrite. And do you know what? Most people who have no relationship with God at all, or who have been in church and have left, do you know what the primary complaint they have is? A bunch of hypocrites. And we give all sorts of neat little sayings like, well, if I'm a hypocrite and I'm keeping you from God, guess who's closer to God? How can you say that? I'm supposed to serve them, aren't I? Aren't I supposed to serve those who despitefully use me and say all kinds of manner against me? Isn't that what Jesus did? Wasn't that not just his example here, but wasn't that example all through his ministry? Of serving those who couldn't have cared less, or serving those who hated him? for serving those who put him on the cross. If I look like Jesus, I look like a servant. If I am not serving, I look like a hypocrite. And I look at those Pharisees and we laugh at them and we say, how could anybody do that? But if I'm not serving, that's what I look like. And that's what people look at my Christianity as. And that's why so many people turn away from it. It's because I like to serve. I want to be served rather than serve. At the Pregnancy Support Center banquet, we heard 3 testimonies of people who had been there and how God had impacted their lives. It was incredible what God had done. You know why? Because the ones working at the Pregnancy Support Center were servants too. One of the things they mentioned was when they got there, they asked, do you need some more? Not what's wrong with you, not why did you do this stuff. You need some more. They served them. They didn't ask anything from them. They served them. And that servanthood allowed God to enter their heart because what they were seeing was not some women who were there taking care of things. What they saw was Jesus because they were serving. Those of you who have gone on disaster relief know that well, don't you? Because you go out there and God makes an incredible impact because of the difference made by those who serve. I went to seminary at Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary. I went there because of the wonderful name that it had. You have San Francisco here. You have Mill Valley right here, which is where seminary was. San Francisco has some of the highest, and did then too, some of the highest housing, highest income. Marin County was higher. They were second, third highest income in the nation. You could see where the seminary was, and you could look up at some houses. Those guys didn't commute to San Francisco and back. They commuted to New York City and back. Had their own airplanes. And would just fly back and forth. Very wealthy, and they hated having seminary there. Because, I got to tell you, seminary cars were not the same kind of cars that were driven around Marin County. Had one guy when I first got there was in a Sunday school class, and he said he went to go park at the Safeway, and a Rolls Royce pulled up next to him. And he thought, well, I know I'm in Marin County. And then he said, I thought, well, at least mine's paid for. And the guy who is native Marin County looked at him and said, so was his. Very wealthy, didn't want poor seminary students there. We tried for decades, 25 years, to get into them. We did things, we did community things, nothing. 2 years after I graduated, they had record storms there, floods. Hillsides came down into homes. This is before organized disaster relief started. The guys that head of Brotherhood in California has called on men to come and help. And they showed up. And they shoveled stuff out, and they helped support houses. And they took their time off work, and they came in and they did all this stuff. And when it was all, by the way, the homeowners never asked how much. At the end of the week, they pulled their checkbooks out and said, how much? And they looked at them and said, nothing. And I said, no. How much? They couldn't conceive of doing something for nothing. They looked at him and said, well, we took time off of work because of the difference God has made in our lives and the relationship we have with Jesus. And we saw the problems that you're having. We wanted to come down to help. You don't owe us anything. In 4 weeks, just regular, ordinary servants made more of an impact than the seminary had made in 25 years. because they served and they saw Jesus. Years later, people would come to a church and say, some men came to my house and cleaned mud out of my house. They thought about Jesus. Servant. Servant. The first thing Jesus gave to his disciples, before he did any other teaching, before he did anything else, was an example. Follow it, he said. You've got to hear this. Amen, amen. You have to hear this. Be a servant. As I have served you, he said, so are you to serve each other. The example we leave behind. Hypocrite or servant is determined right there. Let's pray. Our Father, it's so easy to identify with you by doing things I think that look like you, that I want to have look like you. It's so easy to let pride and prestige come in place of being servant. Father, so many people in our area, so many people desperately need to see you. Help us to show you. Ask you to use the time we're going to have with handing out meals to make that difference. I ask you as going to Dollar General, wherever I am, that you have my heart in such a place that it must serve. Father, when I fail, when we fail, do whatever is necessary to get our hearts back. That we may show you and know you. In your name I pray. Amen. Our hymn of invitation is number 281. It says 581 in your hymnals, and you'll need your hymnals. And number 281, speak my heart. And it may be that God needs to, maybe in a different way. It is so easy to grow at ease. It is so easy to be in a habit. It may be that God is calling you to change some of those and make that difference. It may be tough for him to look at you and say, it's not servant right now, it's hypocrite. Or it may be that God will come to you during this time as we sing, Speak to My Heart. And as he speaks to your heart, he affirms you and says, this is my beloved son, my beloved daughter, with whom I'm well pleased. And he brings to you again and again times in your life where you have served. Not 20 years ago, this past week, this past month. The times that he moved you, the times that you listened, the times that you acted. And the way that you served and the way that you showed people who Jesus is. So as we sing, Speak to My Heart, this is not one of simple, a time where God convicts you. This can also be a time where God praises you. Where God shows you where you have been that servant. But if not, let God take the pride, because that's what it is. Let God take the pride and the humility, a real humility. Let you become a real servant. As we stand and sing, Speak to My Heart.
Yes, I'll be on my way soon. I'm just gonna get you. I'm just running late, okay? Oh no. My heel just broke. My heel really just...
Alright, this is my final attempt.
Yes, I'll be on my way soon. I'm just gonna get you. I'm just running late, okay? Oh no. My heel just broke. My heel really just...
Alright, this is my final attempt at the straw challenge. Gatorade. Stay. This is my mega jumbo straw. We put it in. Oh no!
So, this is my nightly habits. Alright, you ready? Hard you can. I got a surprise for you.
What?
Catch. There's nothing there. There's nothing here. Now go check homeboy.
Boy, you just gonna kick out there. Come on, Rob.
Yeah, I live under the ground.
My people with black parents out there, go ahead and put 10 fingers up. And if your mom has ever said any of these things, go ahead and put a finger down for them. Put a finger down if your mom has ever said, I'm not one of your little friends. Put a finger down if your mom has ever said, do I look like Boo Boo the Fool? Put a finger down if your mom has ever said, a hard head make a soft behind. Put a finger down if your mom has ever said, first of all, check your tone. Put a finger down if your mama's ever said, you better stop crying before I give you something to cry about. Put a finger down if your mama's ever said, you got McDonald's money? Put a finger down if your mama's ever said, well, when we get in the store, don't look at nothing, don't touch nothing, don't ask for nothing because you're not getting nothing. Put a finger down if your mama's ever said, you better fix your face before I fix it for you. Put a finger down if your mama's ever said you smell like outside. Put a finger down if your mama's ever said, I brought you into this world and I can take you right out. Put a finger down if your mama's ever said, I hope you know that schoolwork like you know them songs.